My name is Daniel Cross, and I'm broadcasting from what's left of station KWVR, about 30 miles outside of Hastings, Nebraska. If you're hearing this, if you've got some old radio that somehow still works, then you know what I'm talking about when I say the world changed 73 days ago. Everything just stopped, and I mean everything that had a computer chip in it, which turns out was pretty much our whole damn world. I've been alone here for the last 2 months, trying to get this old transmitter working again, and yesterday I finally figured it out. This beautiful piece of junk from 1958, all vacuum tubes and copper wire, sitting in the back storage room like some kind of museum piece that everyone forgot about. The station manager, Bill, he used to joke that we kept it around for the apocalypse, and I guess the joke was on us, because here we are, and this ancient beast is the only thing in the building that still has any life in it. Let me tell you what happened, or at least what I saw happen, because I'm still trying to piece it all together myself. It was April 2nd, a Tuesday morning, about 11:30. I was actually under my truck in the parking lot, changing the oil, when the sky lit up with this strange white flash, like lightning but wrong somehow, spreading out across the whole sky instead of coming down. Then about 10 seconds later, another one, and then a third one maybe 20 seconds after that. My truck, a 2014 Chevy, just died right there while it was running, and every car in the parking lot did the same thing, just went completely dead, like someone had pulled out their souls. At first I thought maybe it was just some weird power surge or something, but then I started walking into town and saw that everything had stopped. Every car made after about 1980 was just sitting there dead. But here's the thing that really got me thinking. There was this old farmer, Tom Henley, driving his 1972 Ford pickup, and it was running just fine. He stopped to help some folks, confused as hell about why everyone else's vehicles had died, and that's when I started to understand what had happened. It wasn't just a power outage. It was something that specifically killed electronics, anything with circuit boards or computer chips. The walk back into Hastings took me about 4 hours, and the whole way I kept seeing the same pattern. New cars dead, old cars running if they were the really basic ones without any computer controls. There was this kid, couldn't have been more than 16, riding a dirt bike from the 70s, weaving between all the stopped cars like it was some kind of video game, except this was real and people were starting to panic. By the time I got to Main Street, the word was already spreading that it was an EMP attack, electromagnetic pulse, the kind of thing they always warned about, but nobody really believed would happen. You want to know something funny? Well, not funny, but ironic, I guess. Kevin Hale, who runs that little repair shop on 3rd Street, the one everyone said was crazy for keeping all those old cars and tractors running, he became the most important person in town overnight. People who wouldn't give him the time of day before were suddenly lined up at his door, begging him to help them find something, anything with wheels that would still run. I saw a lawyer, still in his $1,000 suit, offering Kevin his Rolex for a beat-up 1978 Dodge that probably wasn't worth $500 a week earlier. The first few days were strange but not terrible, if I'm being honest. People helped each other out, shared food, checked on neighbors, that kind of thing you'd expect in a small town. But then reality started setting in when the food at the grocery stores began running out, and nobody could figure out how to get more delivered without working trucks or any way to contact suppliers. The old mechanical diesel trucks could run, sure, but there weren't enough of them, and nobody knew where to send them anyway. since all the computer systems that tracked inventory and shipping were fried. I spent a lot of time at the county airport those first weeks, trying to understand exactly what happened, and that's where I met Rachel Voss. She'd been working the control tower when everything went dark, and she had this look in her eyes like she'd seen ghosts, which I guess in a way she had. She told me she was tracking 47 planes on her screen when the first pulse hit, commercial flights, private planes, everything just disappearing from radar all at once. The only ones that made it were a handful of old prop planes with basic mechanical controls and pilots who knew how to fly without instruments. Rachel had this theory that made my skin crawl when she explained it. She said the attack was too perfect, too complete to be some foreign enemy who got lucky. 3 pulses, timed exactly right to catch the whole continental United States, each one positioned to create overlapping coverage without any gaps. Whoever did this knew exactly where our weak points were, knew exactly how high to detonate those things to get maximum spread without wasting energy. She kept saying it had to be an inside job, someone who had access to our defense plans, our infrastructure maps, everything. About 3 weeks after the attack, I found something that made me think Rachel was onto something. I went out to the National Guard depot east of town, the one they closed down 5 years ago, but never completely emptied out. In the commander's office, there were all these papers scattered around, stuff that should have been classified or destroyed but got left behind in the chaos. One folder was labeled Exercise Storm Candle, dated just 3 weeks before the attack, and it was all about conducting drills for operating without electronic systems after an EMP event. They were literally practicing for this exact scenario right before it happened. The world we're living in now is like nothing I could have imagined, even though I guess I should have seen it coming. We've basically gone back to how things were in the 1960s. We have infrastructure built for computers that don't work. The water still flows in most places because a lot of that is gravity fed or uses mechanical pumps that survived. And the older hospitals with backup generators that were stored properly can still do basic stuff. But anything that required a computer to function is just dead weight now. You know who's running things now? It's not the mayor or the city council. Most of them took off for their family farms or wherever they thought would be safer. The people with actual power are the ones who know how to fix old engines, work with their hands, grow food without modern equipment. Thomas Keene, who everyone used to laugh at for running that antique tractor museum outside of town, he's got 30 people working for him now. Farming with equipment from the 40s and 50s that still runs perfect. He's trading food for labor, tools for seed, basically running a little empire based on knowing how to make old stuff work. The new economy is something else entirely, nothing like what we had before. Paper money is basically worthless since the banks can't verify anything without computers, so we're back to bartering and trading. A working chainsaw from the 60s is worth more than a luxury car that won't run. People are trading ammunition for antibiotics, gasoline for canned goods, and mechanical skills for just about anything you can imagine. I fixed an old tube radio for someone last week and got enough food for 2 weeks in return. The strangest thing I've noticed, and this is what really makes me think someone planned this whole thing, is that certain government facilities just happened to be doing maintenance on their electronic systems when the attack hit. The regional FEMA office had pulled all their computers for upgrades that morning. The Air Force Base had their radar systems offline for scheduled repairs, and 3 major banks had moved their physical gold reserves to new locations just the week before. Once is coincidence, twice is suspicious, but this many times, someone knew exactly when this was going to happen. I'm going to keep broadcasting every day at this same time, assuming I can keep finding diesel for the generator and nothing breaks that I can't fix. If you're out there listening, if you've got your own stories about what happened or what you've seen since, I want to hear them. We need to start putting the pieces together, figure out who did this to us and why, because I don't believe for a second that this was some random attack from Russia or China or whoever they want us to blame. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell you about what I found at Cheyenne Mountain, and trust me, you're going to want to hear this. There are people still alive in there, still working, and what they told me about where those EMPs came from will make you question everything. This is Daniel Cross. Keep your radios on, keep your eyes open, and don't trust anyone who says they're here to help until you know who they really are. I'll be back tomorrow at the same time. Stay safe out there. Well, I made it back from Colorado Springs in one piece, which honestly is more than I expected when I set out yesterday morning. If you heard my broadcast yesterday, you know I promised to tell you about Cheyenne Mountain. And folks, what I found there is going to change everything you think you know about this attack. I drove all day in my neighbor's old '69 Ford pickup, the one he always kept under a tarp in his garage like it was made of gold. The drive to Colorado was surreal, and I mean that in the worst possible way. Interstate 76 was like a graveyard of modern life. Thousands of cars just sitting there empty, some with their doors still open where people abandoned them and started walking. I had to weave between them the whole way, sometimes driving on the shoulder or the median just to get through. And more than once, I had to push cars out of the way with the Ford's bumper. The strangest part was the silence when I stopped for gas, siphoning it out of abandoned cars with a hand pump. I knew NORAD was built to survive nuclear war, so I figured if anyone was still operating after the EMP, it would be them. The entrance isn't exactly hidden, but getting someone to actually talk to me, that took some doing. I basically had to camp outside the main gate for 6 hours, honking the horn every few minutes until someone finally came out. Turns out there's still 12 people in there, military folks who were on duty when everything went dark and just never left, keeping watch over systems that mostly don't work anymore, but writing down everything they see with pencil and paper. Colonel Carter Shaw is running things now, or what's left of things to run. He's this weathered guy, probably late 50s, with the kind of tired eyes you see on people who've been awake for way too long, thinking about problems they can't solve. He told me something that made my blood run cold. Said the tracking data they managed to save on paper showed the EMPs didn't come from overseas missiles or bombers. They came from satellites already in orbit. And here's the kicker. Those satellites were launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base in Cape Canaveral about 2 years ago. Carter walked me through their handwritten logs, pages and pages of observations they've been keeping since the attack. According to their records, these satellites were officially designated as communications platforms, part of some upgraded military network that was supposed to make our forces more connected and responsive. Nobody in the mountain knew they were carrying nuclear devices. Nobody even suspected it until they detected the electromagnetic signatures during the attack. 3 satellites, 3 EMPs, perfect positioning to blanket North America without affecting Mexico or Canada too badly. The timing is what really gets me, and Carter agrees that it stinks to high heaven. These weapons were already in place, just waiting up there in space for someone to give the order. But here's where it gets even stranger. The command to detonate didn't come through normal military channels. Carter showed me their communication logs from that morning, and there's no record of any authorization from the Pentagon, the White House, nothing. The satellites just activated on their own, or someone with very specific access codes triggered them outside the chain of command. While I was there, I met Laura Bishop, who used to work for the NSA before everything went sideways. She's been living in the mountains since the attack, says she can't bring herself to leave because at least there she feels like she's doing something useful by helping track what happened. Laura had been following financial patterns before the attack, part of some task force looking for terrorist funding, but what she found was completely different. Starting about 6 months before the EMPs, there was massive movement in the stock market, tech executives selling off positions, defense contractors moving assets offshore, insider trading on a scale she'd never seen before. Laura showed me printouts she'd made before the attack, and the pattern is undeniable. In January, 3 months before the EMPs, executives from 14 major tech companies all sold their stock within the same week. They didn't just sell some of it, they liquidated everything, billions of dollars worth. Then they started buying very specific things like farmland in remote areas, old equipment that wouldn't be affected by EMPs, gold and silver, mechanical tools, basically everything you'd want if you knew modern civilization was about to stop working. But it wasn't just the money movement that caught Laura's attention. She tracked physical relocations too, where these executives and their families were moving to. Almost all of them left major cities for rural properties in the months before the attack, places with natural water sources, good soil for farming, and most importantly, far away from population centers that would struggle the most after an EMP. One tech billionaire bought an entire abandoned mining town in Montana and spent millions retrofitting it with mechanical systems and stockpiling supplies. I also found Aaron Pike's ham radio logs in the emergency communication room, and this guy was meticulous about documenting everything he heard on the airwaves. For weeks before the attack, he was picking up encrypted military transmissions using code words that didn't match any standard operations. Phrases like Prometheus is go and assets relocated, and ensure continuity protocols keep showing up in his notes. Aaron even wrote that he tried to report these unusual transmissions to his superiors, but they told him it was probably just training exercises and not to worry about it. The real-world impact of all this is starting to show in ways that make more sense now. Claire Sutton, who's been running a makeshift clinic using old medical equipment, told me before I left for Colorado that she'd noticed something odd. Certain medical supplies that should have been destroyed by the EMP were found in perfect condition in specific locations, stored in Faraday cages that nobody remembered installing. Same story at the water treatment plant. Backup mechanical systems that weren't on any official inventory, but were ready to go when the electronic systems failed. Transportation has become this weird mix of very old and very clever. Owen Carter, who used to be an electrical engineer, has started building a telegraph network using salvaged copper wire and car batteries. It's 1800s technology, but it works, and he's connected 5 towns already with more planned. The railroad tracks are still good, and people are literally building steam engines from scratch using plans from museums and old books. We're rebuilding from a technology level of about 1890, which is actually higher than I would have expected. I keep thinking about those warehouse manifests I found last week, the ones showing someone had been stockpiling specific equipment in strategic locations. Hand-operated water pumps, mechanical farm equipment, medical supplies that don't require refrigeration, ammunition for older firearms that don't have electronic components. This wasn't random prepping by paranoid individuals. This was coordinated, systematic preparation by people who knew exactly what was coming and exactly what would be needed afterward. The question that keeps eating at me is, why would anyone do this to their own country? Carter thinks it might be about control, that someone wanted to reset society back to a point where centralized authority could be reestablished more easily. Laura believes it's about resources, that someone calculated we were heading for a collapse anyway from overuse and decided to trigger it on their terms rather than wait for it to happen naturally. But honestly, I don't think any of us really knows yet. We're just looking at pieces of a puzzle that's too big to see whole. What really bothers me is how prepared certain people were compared to the rest of us. While most Americans were suddenly thrust back into the 19th century, there's a whole group of people who seem to be doing just fine. They have food, medicine, working vehicles, generators, everything they need to not just survive, but actually thrive in this new world. It's like they had the test answers before the rest of us even knew there was going to be a test. Tomorrow I'm heading to Austin because Laura gave me an address she thinks I need to check out. She says it's connected to something called Project Reset, which she found references to in some of the financial documents. I don't know what I'm going to find there, but if it helps explain why someone would destroy our entire way of life on purpose, then it's worth the risk. The Ford has enough fuel for the trip if I'm careful, and I've got an old revolver that still works just fine, so I should be okay. If something happens and I don't make it back for tomorrow's broadcast, well, at least you know someone's still fighting to figure this out. Keep listening to whoever takes over this frequency. Keep sharing information. Keep working together. That's the only way we're going to get through this and maybe eventually hold accountable whoever did this to us. This is Daniel Cross, KWVR, signing off for today. Stay strong out there, and remember, we're not beaten yet. I'm back from Austin, and I'm angry. No, that's not strong enough. I'm furious about what I found there. If you've been listening to my broadcasts, you know I went looking for answers about something called Project Reset. And let me tell you, what I discovered makes everything else look like child's play. The address Laura Bishop gave me led to a burned-out office building on the outskirts of Austin, a place called Nexus Solutions that most people probably never heard of, but should have been paying attention to all along. The building looked like someone torched it on purpose, probably trying to destroy evidence, but they did a rushed job because the basement was mostly intact. I had to crawl through a broken window and use my flashlight to navigate down there, and what I found was a room surrounded by copper mesh, what they call a Faraday cage, with old servers powered by a diesel generator that was still running. Someone wanted this information to survive, protected it specially, and left it here for people like me to find. The servers had thousands of files about Project Reset. This wasn't some government conspiracy or foreign attack. It was a group of private citizens, wealthy beyond imagination, who decided they had the right to push the reset button on civilization. They called themselves the Architects, about 200 tech billionaires, defense contractors, and banking executives who believed modern society was about 10 years away from complete collapse anyway. The main guy behind all this was someone named Victor Rains, who ran a tech company worth about $40 billion before the attack. His manifesto was on those servers, and reading it made me want to punch through a wall. He wrote about controlled regression to sustainable technology and eliminating dependency on fragile networks like it was some kind of noble mission. According to him, they were saving humanity from itself by forcing us back to a simpler time before we could destroy ourselves completely. These people spent over a decade getting ready for what they called the transition day. They bought massive amounts of farmland in strategic locations, converted their wealth into physical assets that would retain value after an EMP, and most importantly, they infiltrated key positions in the military and government. The files showed they had people in Space Force, the Pentagon, the NSA, even Congress, all working together to make this happen while keeping everyone else in the dark. The technical details of how they pulled it off are almost elegant in their simplicity, if you can call mass destruction elegant. They piggybacked on legitimate military satellite launches, adding EMP devices disguised as communication equipment. The Space Force personnel who installed them thought they were upgrading our defense capabilities, never knowing they were actually planting the seeds of our destruction. The activation codes were stolen over years by insiders, then used all at once to trigger the attack. What really makes my stomach turn is how they planned for the aftermath. They knew exactly how many people would die, had it calculated down to statistical models showing projected casualties from lack of medicine, food distribution collapse, and violence. Their estimate was 30% casualties in the first year, which they considered acceptable losses for achieving their new world order. They actually wrote acceptable losses like they were talking about inventory shrinkage, not human lives. I found Maggie Rhodes hiding in an abandoned bookstore near the Nexus building, and it took me 2 hours to convince her I wasn't one of them before she'd talked to me. She used to be Victor Rains' personal assistant, had access to everything before she figured out what was really happening and ran. According to her, the architects didn't just plan the attack, they positioned themselves to profit from it, to emerge as the saviors and leaders of whatever society came next. Maggie told me about their resource positioning strategy, and it's exactly what you'd expect from people who think they're smarter than everyone else. They control seed vaults with heritage varieties that will grow without modern fertilizers, fuel depots positioned along major transport routes, medical stockpiles in climate-controlled bunkers, even libraries of technical knowledge about how to rebuild infrastructure from scratch. They're sitting on everything needed to restart civilization, but only on their terms, with them in charge. The second phase of their plan is already starting, according to the files I found. They're emerging from their bunkers and protected compounds, offering aid to desperate communities, but always with strings attached. Want medicine for your sick kids? You'll need to agree to their governance structure. Need seeds for next year's planting? You'll follow their agricultural policies. It's not conquest by force, it's control through dependency, making themselves indispensable to survival. But here's where they made their big mistake, and why I actually have some hope despite all this horror. They thought people would be grateful for any help, that desperation would make us compliant and willing to accept their leadership without question. What they didn't count on was human stubbornness, our ability to figure things out for ourselves. to work together without needing some self-appointed savior to tell us how. Communities are organizing themselves, sharing knowledge, rebuilding on their own terms. Simon Cole, who I mentioned finding references to in the military files, has apparently figured out most of what I just told you independently. He's put together a resistance network, not with guns and violence, but with information and cooperation. They're tracking down Architect members, documenting their crimes, and most importantly, liberating their resource caches whenever they find them. It's dangerous work, but somebody has to do it, and more people are joining every day as word spreads. The files also contain something that gives us a real fighting chance. A complete list of all 200 Architect members, their photos, their bunker locations, everything. I've been copying it all down by hand, and I'm going to start broadcasting these names tomorrow. These people thought they could hide in the shadows while reshaping the world, but secrets don't stay secret when enough people are looking for the truth. What strikes me most is how they underestimated regular people's ability to adapt and overcome. Sure, the first months were chaos, and yes, a lot of people died who didn't need to, but we're figuring it out. Mechanical workshops are popping up everywhere. People are relearning old skills. Communities are creating their own solutions without waiting for some grand plan from above. The architects wanted to create dependency, but instead they've created independence on a scale I don't think anyone could have predicted. Austin itself is actually doing better than I expected, despite everything. The population has shifted around a lot, with people moving out of the city center to areas with better water access and farmable land, but they're organizing. Local factories that can run on mechanical power are starting back up, producing basic goods like tools and clothing. It's rough, sure, but it's not the total collapse the architects predicted and planned for, which must really burn them up. I've heard rumors about fighting between different architect factions, that some of them are having second thoughts now that their perfect plan is falling apart. Apparently, there was supposed to be a coordinated emergence after 1 year, all of them appearing simultaneously to offer their solutions to a grateful population. But with people like Simon Cole and others exposing them, with communities succeeding on their own, their timeline is shot and they're starting to panic. The strangest thing I found in those files was a section about contingency plans if their initial approach failed. They actually discussed using their remaining resources to trigger secondary disasters, like releasing water from dams or setting fires to force people into submission. The fact that they even considered these options tells you everything you need to know about what kind of people we're dealing with here. Tomorrow, I'm going to start reading that list of names on air, and I'm going to keep reading it every day until everyone knows who these people are. They wanted to be the hidden architects of our new world, but they're about to become the most hunted people in America. Not for violence, I'm not advocating that, but for justice, for accountability, for making sure they never have the power to do something like this again. If you're near any of the locations I'm going to mention, if you recognize any of the names, spread the word in your community. These people need to answer for what they've done, for the lives lost, for the suffering they caused, for the arrogance of thinking they had the right to decide everyone's future. This is Daniel Cross, and tomorrow we start taking back our world from the people who tried to steal it. Stay strong, stay alert, and get ready to hear some names you're going to want to remember. I barely made it out of Austin alive yesterday, and I'm not being dramatic when I say that. The architects have security forces, hired guns who kept their mechanical weapons maintained and ready, and they came looking for anyone who accessed those Nexus files. I had to hide in a drainage pipe for 3 hours while they searched the area, and I could hear them talking about containment protocols and information suppression, like they were still running some corporate board meeting instead of hunting people down. I'm broadcasting from a different location today, won't say where exactly, but I'm safe for now, and I've got something important to share. While I was hiding from those mercenaries, I met Hannah Frost, who used to work as a congressional aide in Washington before everything went dark. She'd been tracking me down after hearing my broadcasts because she had pieces of this puzzle that I was missing, specifically about how deep the architect's influence went into our government. Hannah told me that 3 senators were brought into a briefing about 6 months before the attack, something about contingency planning for societal restructuring in case of catastrophic system failure. They were told it was all theoretical, wargaming scenarios, thinking through what would happen if our infrastructure got hit. But the level of detail they went into, the specific resources they talked about protecting, the exact locations they identified as critical, it was clearly more than just an academic exercise. The infrastructure the architects built before the attack is even more extensive than I realized. Hannah had seen requisition orders, shipping manifests, construction permits, all pointing to a parallel system they created right under our noses. They built bunkers powered by hydroelectric and geothermal energy, completely mechanical systems that would keep running no matter what happened to the grid. They installed old-style communication networks using telegraph lines and light signals, creating their own network that nobody else even knew existed. I managed to track down Peter Vaughn yesterday before I had to run, and this guy's story is something else. He was one of their engineers, helped design the bunker systems before he figured out what they were really for and got out. Peter gave me locations of 5 major facilities in Montana, Wyoming, and West Virginia, each one capable of supporting 500 people indefinitely. They've got underground farms using grow lights powered by water turbines, mechanical air filtration, workshops for manufacturing, everything you'd need to wait out the collapse of civilization in comfort. But Peter also told me about their fatal flaw, and it's almost poetic in its simplicity. These bunkers were designed to be self-sufficient but not independent. They need regular supply runs for certain chemicals, replacement parts, specialized materials. The architects assumed they'd control the supply chains after the collapse, but with groups like Simon Cole's resistance intercepting their shipments and communities refusing to trade with them, they're starting to run short on critical supplies. The resistance network that's forming is unlike anything I've expected to see. Nina Torres, who I've been in contact with through messenger riders, has cells operating across 7 states now. They're using carrier pigeons to coordinate, believe it or not, and light telegraph systems that Peter helped them build after he defected. It's 1800s technology, fighting against people who thought they could control the future, and somehow it's working. These resistance cells aren't just fighting back, they're documenting everything. Every architect identified, every resource cache found, every crime committed, it's all being recorded in handwritten logs that are being copied and distributed. Hannah showed me one of these logs, and it's incredibly detailed. Names, dates, locations, witness testimonies, everything you'd need for trials once we get some form of justice system running again. The architects' phase 2 is already falling apart from what I'm hearing. They plan to emerge as the sole source of advanced technology, offering EMP-hardened equipment to communities that agreed to their governance. But someone in the resistance got hold of their technical manuals and started distributing them widely. Now local blacksmiths and mechanics are building their own hardened equipment, crude but functional, taking away the monopoly the architects thought they'd have. What's really interesting is how different regions are handling things. Cole Bennett has essentially become a river king, controlling trade along the Mississippi with a fleet of old barges and steamboats he's gotten running. He's not aligned with the architects, but not exactly resistance either, just carved out his own little empire based on controlling water transport. Fiona Lane down in Texas has done something similar with the oil fields, using mechanical pumps to extract crude and simple refineries to process it into usable fuel. The architects are starting to fragment, according to several sources I've talked to. Some want to accelerate their timeline, come out in force, and try to establish control through strength. Others want to negotiate, try to integrate themselves into the communities that are forming without revealing their role in the attack. A few have apparently gone completely dark, abandoning the plan entirely and just trying to survive on their own terms with the resources they've stockpiled. I intercepted some of their communications yesterday, and they're scared. They use code words and light signals, but the message is clear. Things are not going according to plan. They expected chaos to last longer, for people to be more desperate, more willing to accept any authority that offered stability. Instead, communities are stabilizing on their own, creating their own currencies, their own defense agreements, their own trade networks, all without the architects' guidance or control. The war crimes evidence is piling up too. We've documented cases where the architects triggered secondary disasters to force migrations, opened dam gates to flood valleys where resistance communities were forming, destroyed seed stores to create artificial famines. They're not just responsible for the EMP attack. They've been actively working to increase suffering whenever communities showed too much independence. But here's what gives me real hope. The counter-revolution is bigger than just the organized resistance. Regular people everywhere are rebuilding without waiting for permission or instruction. Mexican trade caravans are coming north with horses and mechanical goods. Canadian provinces are sending aid south via repaired railroad lines. And Cuba has been shipping medical supplies and food via sailing vessels. The world is reconnecting through human determination. Jonah Mercer, who Hannah told me about, actually managed to capture an entire architect bunker in Montana with a group of freed prisoners. They didn't destroy it or loot it. They're reverse engineering everything, studying the technology, learning how to replicate it with simpler materials. They're planning to publish technical manuals, spread the knowledge freely so everyone can benefit, not just the chosen few. The networks forming between communities are organic, bottom-up, everything. People are sharing knowledge about water purification, food preservation, basic medicine, mechanical repair, all the skills needed to survive and thrive without modern technology. It's like the entire country is going through a crash course in 19th century living, and we're actually passing the test. I've got intelligence suggesting that Warren Cross is the operational leader still trying to hold the architects together from inside NORAD. He's using military resources to protect architect interests, claiming it's about maintaining order and preventing total anarchy. But more and more military personnel are refusing his orders as word spreads about what really happened, about who's really responsible for all this death and suffering. Tomorrow I'm going to broadcast the complete list of Architect members like I promised. All 200 names, their last known locations, their roles in the conspiracy, everything. Some people think I shouldn't do this, that it'll lead to vigilante violence, but I think people deserve to know who did this to them. These aren't anonymous villains. They're real people with names and faces who made the conscious decision to destroy our world so they could rebuild it in their image. If you're in a community that's rebuilding, that's found ways to work together and survive, you're already winning against the architects. They wanted to be necessary, to be the only option for survival, but you've proven them wrong. Keep proving them wrong. Keep building. Keep cooperating. Keep refusing their help when it comes with conditions. This is Daniel Cross, and tomorrow we name names. Get ready to know your enemies. This might be my last broadcast from this location. The architects know I have their files. They know I'm about to expose every last one of them, and they're pulling out all the stops to prevent it. But I've got the generator running, the transmitter is hot, and I'm gonna stay on the air as long as I can, because this information needs to get out there, needs to spread to every community that's still fighting to understand what happened to us and who's responsible. Before I start reading names, I need to tell you what I learned last night from a source I never expected. Warren Cross, the head architect running things from NORAD, sent me a message through intermediaries. He wanted to negotiate, to make a deal, offered me a place in their new order if I'd just stay quiet about what I know. The messenger, a young woman who'd been coerced into working for them, also brought intelligence from inside their operation that she'd memorized, hoping someone like me would be listening. Warren's message revealed something crucial about their mindset. He genuinely believes they saved humanity, that without their intervention, we were maybe 5 years away from complete ecological and economic collapse that would have killed 90% of the population instead of the 15% who've died so far. In his twisted logic, they're heroes who made the hard choice to amputate the infected limb before gangrene killed the whole body. The fact that they appointed themselves as surgeons without anyone's consent doesn't seem to bother him at all. But the messenger also told me about the cracks forming in their organization. There have been 3 suicides among architect members in the last week, people who couldn't live with what they'd done once they saw the actual human cost instead of just numbers on a spreadsheet. 2 others have fled their bunkers and are trying to disappear into regular communities under false identities. The guilt is eating them alive from the inside, which is exactly what they deserve. The evidence of their war crimes keeps mounting every day. Yesterday, I confirmed reports that they deliberately destroyed insulin production facilities to increase diabetic deaths, poisoned seed stores in communities that refused their governance offers, and even assassinated local leaders who were successfully organizing without their help. This wasn't just about resetting technology. It was about creating maximum dependency through maximum suffering. Jonah Mercer's group in Montana has been sending me intelligence through their courier network, and what they found in that captured bunker is staggering. The architects had detailed files on every community in North America, population counts, resource assessments, leadership profiles, resistance potential ratings. They were planning to divide the continent into administrative zones, each run by an architect council with absolute authority over food distribution, medical care, education, everything. They even had breeding programs planned out, genetic selection protocols to create what they called an optimized population for the post-reset world. They were going to decide who could have children, how many, and with whom, all in the name of building their perfect society. Reading those documents made me physically sick, the cold calculation of it, the complete disregard for human dignity and freedom. But here's what they didn't count on, and what's really going to destroy them. The information age might be over, but the age of information isn't. People are copying and sharing everything we learn about them, handwriting duplicates, teaching others, spreading knowledge through songs and stories that travel from community to community. They thought destroying our computers would destroy our ability to communicate and organize, but humans have been doing both for thousands of years without electricity. The resistance has developed something beautiful in its simplicity. They call it the chain letter network, where each person who receives information copies it 5 times and sends it to 5 different communities. Within weeks, information can spread across the entire continent, unstoppable and untraceable. The architects, with all their planning, never anticipated good old-fashioned human stubbornness and creativity. Nina Torres sent word that they've identified 17 architect supply convoys in the last month and liberated their contents. Medical supplies, preserved food, technical manuals, water purification tablets, all redistributed to communities that need them most. The architects are getting desperate, starting to turn on each other, accusing one another of security breaches and incompetence. Their perfect unity is crumbling. Speaking of crumbling, let me tell you about their Phase 3, which Peter Vaughn just informed me about. If they can't control the rebuilding, they plan to trigger what they call controlled chaos events. They've got caches of biological weapons, not deadly diseases, but pathogens designed to destroy specific crops, create food shortages they could then solve with their protected seed stores. It's blackmail on a continental scale, starve or submit. But we're onto them now, and communities are taking precautions. People are saving heritage seeds, diversifying crops, creating redundant food systems that can't be destroyed with a single attack. The architects wanted to be gods of the new world, but they're just men and women who made the mistake of thinking they were smarter than everyone else combined. Now it's time to start naming names, and I'm going to give you everything I have on each one. First on the list is Warren Cross himself, 58 years old, former CEO of Titan Defense Systems, currently operating from NORAD with a security detail of 40 mercenaries. He personally signed off on the EMP deployment and has been coordinating architect operations since day one. His bunker complex is at coordinates that I'll repeat 3 times so you can write them down. Next is Victor Raines, the tech billionaire who wrote their manifesto and designed their social restructuring plans. 62 years old, last seen at his compound in Montana near Glacier National Park, protected by former special forces who think they're protecting legitimate government continuity. He's responsible for the psychological warfare protocols, the plans to break community spirits through engineered disasters. Margaret Wheeler, former board member of 6 major pharmaceutical companies, age 55. She coordinated the destruction of medical infrastructure to create dependency on architect-controlled supplies. currently believed to be in a bunker facility in West Virginia, overseeing their medical stockpile distribution. She personally profited from insider trading worth over $2 billion in the months before the attack. Thomas Brightwater, aerospace contractor who managed the satellite EMP installations. 49 years old, hiding in a converted missile silo in North Dakota with his family and security team. He knew exactly what those satellites would do and helped design the deployment pattern for maximum coverage and damage. Jennifer Castell, former deputy director at the NSA who provided intelligence and access codes. 51 years old, currently at a facility in Wyoming coordinating their surveillance operations. She used her position to identify and eliminate potential threats to the plan, including having 3 whistleblowers killed in supposed accidents. Robert Kim, investment banker who managed the architect's financial preparations. 47 years old, location currently unknown, but last spotted in Colorado trying to establish a new currency system based on resource credits. He moved $30 billion in assets in preparation for the attack, destroying thousands of pension funds and retirement accounts in the process. David Marsh, biotech executive who developed their crop destruction pathogens. 59 years old, operating from a laboratory bunker in Nevada. He's created diseases that could destroy our food supply in weeks if released, and he's holding them over our heads like the sword of Damocles. Sarah Constantine, former Pentagon strategic planner who designed their post-reset military structure. 53 years old, commanding private military forces from a base in Utah. She's responsible for the containment protocols that have led to the execution of hundreds of survivors who knew too much. Michael Chen, infrastructure specialist who identified critical targets for maximum societal disruption. 45 years old, believed to be in Oregon managing their Pacific Northwest operations. His targeting plans led directly to the collapse of water systems that killed thousands in the first weeks. Lisa Hammond, propaganda specialist who designed their information control strategies. 48 years old, location unknown, but actively coordinating their narrative management. She's the one trying to paint the architects as saviors rather than mass murderers. I could keep going for hours. And I will. I've got all 200 names, their histories, their locations when known, their specific crimes against humanity. But let me pause here to say something important. If you encounter any of these people, don't kill them. I know the anger you're feeling. I feel it too. But we're better than them. Capture them if you can. Exile them if you must, but document everything. We're going to rebuild some form of justice system. And when we do, these people need to face trial for what they've done. The choice we face now is critical for our future. We can descend into revenge and chaos, which is actually what some architects want because it would justify their actions, or we can prove them wrong by rebuilding better than before. Every community that cooperates without their help, every problem we solve without their resources, every day we survive and thrive without their guidance is a victory against their philosophy. Some of you might be wondering why I'm taking this risk, why I'm painting such a massive target on my back by broadcasting all this. The truth is, I can't live with myself if I don't. These people took everything from us, our technology, our comfort, our loved ones, our future as we knew it, and they did it deliberately, with calculation and preparation. They need to be exposed, and if that exposure costs me my life, at least I'll die knowing I did something worthwhile. But this isn't just about exposure, it's about prevention. The architects aren't the first group in history to think they knew better than everyone else, and they won't be the last unless we learn from this. We need to build our new communities with transparency, with accountability, with systems that prevent any small group from accumulating this kind of power ever again. We need to tell this story to our children and their children so they never forget how close we came to losing everything to the arrogance of a few. The messenger from Warren Cross is still here, and she's chosen to defect completely. Her name is Amanda, and she's been inside their operations for months, pretending to cooperate while memorizing everything she could. She tells me that morale among architect security forces is collapsing, that many are only staying because they don't know where else to go. She's going to help me broadcast more intelligence after I finish the list. Insider information that could help resistance groups everywhere. I want to be clear about something before I continue with the names. Not everyone who worked for the architects knew the full plan. Some were just employees, technicians, security guards who thought they were doing legitimate work. We need to distinguish between the architects of this disaster and the people they deceived into helping them. Justice requires precision, not blind revenge. The world we're rebuilding doesn't have to follow their blueprint. They wanted a rigid hierarchy with them at the top, but we're creating networks of equals. They wanted controlled scarcity to maintain power, but we're sharing abundance wherever we find it. They wanted fear and dependency, but we're building courage and self-reliance. Every day we prove their fundamental assumption wrong, that humans can't be trusted to govern themselves without elite guidance. I'm going to continue broadcasting names and locations for as long as this transmitter holds out. But remember, this information is just the beginning. The real work happens in your communities, holding these people accountable, preventing them from infiltrating your leadership, and most importantly, building something better than what they destroyed. They gave us a choice they didn't mean to give us. The choice to prove that humanity doesn't need would-be gods to survive and thrive. This is Daniel Cross, still broadcasting, still fighting, and not planning to stop anytime soon. The list continues, and so does our resistance. Stay strong, stay human, and remember, we're writing the next chapter of history right now, and it's going to be one where ordinary people defeated those who thought they were extraordinary. The signal is still strong, and I've got 170 more names to go.